And just like that, we're live on Cache Canada Chats, and we have DougyB with us again. And I want to say, hi, Doug.
Hi.
First, I want to apologize for having a live chat show on Leafs Night Hockey. Who knew? Anyway, if you see, we're gonna put you in on a little clue. He's already given it away in the chat room. If you see him look away and suddenly go quiet, it's because something's happening on his phone where he's watching the game.
Well, the alternate is if you see me look away and either scream or boo, you'll know that somebody scored.
Oh, maybe I should keep a little ticker up there myself so I know what's going on. So you'll keep us surprised. You'll keep us apprised of the score as we go along. That's awesome.
Yep.
And we have Ausfox with us today, and Geocacher Ken, I see, has commented on the live screen. So today we're going to be talking about LAB2GPX. This is another way of getting coordinates from Adventure Labs into a GPX file, into your Garmin, or onto cachetur. So there we go. I took a brief look at the website. It seems very simple. I was going to give it a try, but I thought, nope, I'm going to wait until this live stream and see you in action. So
great.
Take it away. Oh, Janet, you just joined us. Hello, all. Hello, Janet.
And David Stokes, too. David asked who picked Game 6 for a chat. David, guilty as charged. However, I'll tell you that this date was picked probably 5 or 6 weeks ago before the playoff schedule for the Leafs was published. So,
and then David asked,
myself.
You can put these GPX files into a Magellan too, I would assume.
I honestly don't know if you can put them into a Magellan. I have no knowledge on Magellan.
Does it take GPX files? I have no idea.
So we'll talk about GPX a little bit, and if you know about GPX from geocaching.com, then the same sort of rules would apply for Magellan for this. So
Kathy,
what we're going to do tonight...
Yeah.
Sorry,
Kathy Laurie was feeling blue.
Feeling blue, me too.
As in blue, as you're blue in you too. Okay.
We're bleeding blue.
And Linda C, hello. Good.
Hello,
okay.
Linda.
So
what we're going to do tonight is we're going to go through this this neat little tool called LAB2GPX. It's a website. We'll show you the website. We'll walk through all the items on the website. There's not a lot. The intent of tonight is to show you how to get coordinates out of LAB2GPX for Adventure Labs and put them into cachetur. Now, if you recall back in January, we did, Dave, you and Karen and I did a broadcast where we talked about Adventure Labs and cachetur.
Yep.
And in that live stream, I showed a rather tedious method for determining the location of the stages of an Adventure Lab. At that time, it works. Absolutely, yes, it works. And at that time, it was the only way that I knew how to do it. Subsequent to that broadcast, several people reached out to me and talked to me about macros that were available in GSAK. Now, I'm a very neophyte GSAK user, so I know nothing about those macros.
I've used it too, and it can be done. I am sure that it's a really good way to do it, but it just I don't use it, so I can't talk to it. Yeah.
And then somebody also pointed me at this tool. So within a few weeks, I had learned about this particular tool, LAB2GPX, and it evolved to include the ability to extract information that could be easily imported into cachetur. And that's when you and I started talking, and I said, you know what, we should do this as an addendum to that January broadcast. So for those of you who are watching, if you've seen the January broadcast on Adventure Labs and cachetur, this today will replace that whole bit about determining where the coordinates are for those Adventure Labs. Everything else applies that we talked about with cachetur in terms of using the bulk waypoint tool and optimization and route planning. All of those things still work. All we're going to talk about today is a much easier way to get a whole bunch of coordinates into cachetur.
And for those who are watching this not live but recorded after the fact, I will try to put a link in the corner, up in the top right corner, to that show, so you can click on that link, or in the description below.
Okay. So having said that, Dave, I'm going to share my screen.
Okay.
Share screen. Let's make sure I share the right screen.
There we go.
So hopefully everybody can see my screen now and this lovely banner that Dave put together.
I love it. It's colorful.
It's amazing. Okay, so what we have on the screen tonight is I have a window over here into my my phone, and I have a browser. And in the browser, I have already opened the LAB2GPX URL. So that was on the banner page. Again, I'll just repeat it: gcutils.de/lab2gpx.
Is that what I have right there on the screen?
Yes, it is.
There we go. I've come prepared.
Okay. We'll come back to this screen in a second. I'll show you that I also have created a draft Cache Canada sample trip. I have Google Maps opened, and I'll explain why it's open in a minute. And I've also opened my geocaching finds. So for those of you who are not familiar with this URL, it's called labs.geocaching.com/logs. And you log into it with your geocaching account, and it lists all of your Adventure Lab finds. Okay? I'm not going to go through this because there's a lot of finds in here. Okay, and I'll explain why I have all of these things open in a minute. All right, so let's get to the heart of it. LAB2GPX. So it says here, this is a tool for generating GPX files of Adventure Labs. This is used for several geocaching apps and for Garmin GPS devices. What it doesn't say here, but you'll see in a minute, it also supports cachetur. The website stores some cookies, so once you start making selections, it remembers the selections you've made, particularly things like the coordinates that you used or some of the other selections that we'll look at below. And there is a way to report bugs or have feature requests. You can click on this link and submit a request or submit some information on a bug that you found.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll walk through all of the options that are in here first, and then we'll actually demonstrate getting some Adventure Lab information into cachetur. Now, one of Cache Canada's YouTube subscribers, Heather, recently reached out and asked me a question about cachetur, a trip plan, because she was planning to do all of the Adventure Labs in Toronto. So as you can see here on my screen, here are all of the Adventure Labs in Toronto. And as you can see, there's quite a few. Now, what Heather did was she watched the previous video and she went and manually entered all of the coordinates into cachetur. Heather inspired me to use Toronto as the basis for our conversation tonight. So the very first piece of LAB2GPX is to put in coordinates, and you can put in the coordinates directly, or you can select on the map where you want to have your starting coordinates. But basically, what you're doing with LAB2GPX is you're telling it where to search for Adventure Labs and what radius you want it to search in. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So in this case, we're going to use Toronto. So I could easily scroll through the map and find Toronto, which is down here. Or alternately, I can go into Google Maps, which is why I have it open, and go right into the heart of Toronto, right down to the foot of Yonge Street, which is kind of the center of Toronto. Right-click on Google Maps and get those coordinates. So those are now copied to the clipboard.
Mm-hmm.
I go back to LAB2GPX and I paste them in. Now at this point, don't hit enter. If you're going to paste those in, just paste them in and don't hit enter.
Okay.
The next thing it asks you for is a radius. So it's saying, how far and wide would you like me to look for Adventure Labs? In this case, we're going to use a fairly wide radius. So we're going to use 30 kilometers, which is about the distance from 1 Yonge Street to the farthest border of Toronto. You could choose to have any radius that you want. If you only wanted to look at, one adventure lab and get that information, you could find out where that adventure lab is and then put those coordinates in and give it a very small radius, like 5 kilometers or 1 kilometer. But in this case,
so 30 kilometers would give people that are not from Ontario and Toronto an idea of how big metropolitan Toronto is. Yeah.
It's and we're just talking about the city of Toronto. We're not talking about all the surrounding areas like Mississauga and Brampton and Markham and Pickering.
Yes. Yep.
Okay. So the next thing is you can tell it how many caches you want to find, and it will limit based on your starting point and your radius. So if you tell it 30 kilometers but only to find 10 caches, it will start in the center at those coordinates and start moving out until it hits 10, and then it will stop, even if there's more within that radius. In this case, we're going to find a lot more. This next drop-down box is kind of important. So it's called cache type. This cache type is what's used when creating a GPX file. It's not important when you're creating a file for importing into cachetur, but if you're creating a GPX file, you need to know some limitations on some devices. So if you're using GSAK and you're importing a GPX file, it understands what a lab cache is. So you would select lab cache, create your GPX file and import it, and everything would be fine. The same with most of the phone-based apps like the HQ app and CGO and Cachely. They understand now what adventure labs are. So they actually have a special icon for them. You would use lab cache in your GPX file. The limitation comes if you're using a Garmin device. So if you wanted to create a GPX file and put these coordinates for adventure labs into your Garmin, Garmins do not understand the lab cache type. If you selected lab cache and you loaded that GPX, you would not see these items. So what people have been doing is selecting a different cache type, a less common cache type, and the option that LAB2GPX gives you is to call it a virtual cache. So in this case, if we were going to load onto our Garmin a GPX file, we would select virtual cache. All those waypoints would be downloaded into the GPX file, and then when we put it into our Garmin, they would appear as virtual caches. Each waypoint, each location would appear as a virtual cache in our Garmin. Okay, so just an important distinction to understand if you do in fact use a GPX file. GSAK and the phone apps, they understand what lab caches are. Garmin devices do not, so you would have to choose virtual cache to download that. Okay. The next line that we have here is called code prefix, and this is important if you're in GSAK. It's not so important if you're just using cachetur. It just is something that you can tell LAB2GPX to use when it's creating a code for each of the waypoints. It defaults to LC, but you could overwrite it and call it AL for Adventure Lab. Some people are creating their own database of Adventure Labs in GSAK, so they may have a different code that they want to use. Now we're going to move down to the box that talks about linear Adventure Labs. So just a quick reminder for those who may not be familiar, Adventure Labs come in 2 flavors. They come in the flavor where you can do the Adventure Lab in any order. You can choose a waypoint and then go to whichever other waypoint you want. And there are Adventure Labs that you must do in a specific order. You have to start at the first location, and then you have to proceed to the next given location, and then the one after that, and the one after that. When you're planning a trip, it's very important to understand if a lab is linear or if a lab is non-linear, and for the linear labs to understand the order that they're in. So if you are going to bring coordinates into cachetur or into GSAK to determine a route, it's very important to be able to know which labs are linear and which order to do those locations in. So this linear Adventure Labs gives you a number of options that you can use. Right? what I'm going to recommend is that for those of us who are focused on cachetur, that you always choose mark using L in title. What will happen is when you import it into cachetur, any linear Adventure Labs will have this square bracket L square bracket in it. Any nonlinear adventures won't. And that will allow you to easily distinguish in cachetur which ones are linear, and then you can plan your route accordingly to do them in order. You'll also see that when LAB2GPX creates either a GPX or a cachetur output, each of the stages has a number, S1, S2, S3, S4, etc. So between tagging them with L for linear and the default capability of LAB2GPX to show these stages, it'll be very easy to look at your route, to plan your route, and to know that you have to keep these ones in a specific order. Okay, so if people want to play with these other sections, that's fine. It might have value if you're using GSAK, or if you're putting your GPX file into your Garmin. But for cachetur, mark using L in title.
Okay.
All right. This next section, usually by default when you first come in, these three boxes are checked. Include waypoint question and cache description. Include description of the waypoint in cache description. Include the description of the Adventure Lab in the cache description. And optionally, include a word message in cache description. This box only pertains to GPX files. It does not pertain to downloading the cachetur format. However, we're going to talk a little bit more about what is contained in this later in this broadcast, because there might be some information that's pertinent. So we are actually going to not only download for cachetur, but we're going to download a GPX file as well and open it up in GSAK and see what this shows. So again, description, if you're using cachetur, it really doesn't matter much what you put in here. If you're using GSAK, play with some of these to understand what they are, and you can go into GSAK and see that information. All right.
Okay.
The exclude box. So the exclude box allows you to, as it says, exclude Adventure Labs that either you own or that you found. So if I were to type my name in here, DougyB, my geocaching name, and I was to run this this output from LAB2GPX for Toronto, it would exclude my two Adventure Labs that I've placed in Toronto. Toronto Train Spotting 1 and Toronto Train Spotting 2. Okay. Alternately, or in addition, you can tell it to exclude your finds. Okay.
That's a big list for you.
It is a big list for me. So you would go in to labs.geocaching.com/logs.
That's why you have that one open.
Right.
There you go.
We would select view source code in the browser and copy and paste the entire source code into this field. So I'm not going to do that because I do want these things to come in, but this is labs.geocaching.com. You can see that I am logged in. It does have my list. And then we could go in and where's my view source? I don't often view the source. I forget what the view source code is. My apologies. I'm not doing it today, but you could. Okay. Alternately, for those downloading the GPX, you could exclude your finds but mark them as found if that's what you want in your statistics when you're loading them up into GSAK. So this box, I would only use it if you're going into an area that you've already done a lot of Adventure Labs in, and you either want to exclude your own or exclude the ones that you found.
Right click, then view source.
Right click, then view source.
Is that correct? That's what Roger says.
There we go. In Chrome, right click and then view page source, and it's going to take a little while.
It's got to load.
So I was just talking to Dave earlier. I have 358 adventure labs that I found. It says it's unresponsive. We're gonna exit that.
Okay.
So it's going to take a while.
You've done too many.
I've done too many. All right. So at this point, we've finished with exclude. Now we come down to the download. The download gives you three options. You can put it into a zipped GPX file, a non-zipped GPX file, or cachetur.no bulk add waypoints. So we're going to start with cachetur.no bulk add waypoints. So I'm just going to quickly review. We've put in our coordinates, right? So there's the coordinates. We chose them in here, right? The foot of Yonge Street over here.
The beginning of the longest road
Right.
in the world, or the longest street.
So we put our coordinates in. We added a radius that should encompass all of Toronto. We haven't played with the max caches. This is not important for cachetur. We're going to use L for any linear. We're not excluding anything, and we're doing it to cachetur. When I hit download, it's actually going to download, in this case, a CSV file. So that's how the cachetur NO bulk waypoint works from LAB2GPX.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll click that down at the bottom. You can see that it's working. It can take a little while depending on what you're trying to do. So we're covering a fairly large area. Now you can see down here in the bottom left that it has actually loaded up that CSV file. I'm going to go into my download folder, and here is that CSV file. Now we could open this CSV file in any number of tools. We could open this in a spreadsheet tool like Excel. We could open this in a text editor. We could open this in Word. I'm going to open it in Notepad, just because that's a tool that I am familiar with.
Whoa.
So this is the output that we had of all of these adventure labs. I'm just going to scroll down a little bit. So you remember when we looked at my phone, we saw that there were an awful lot of adventure labs in Toronto. And
Wow.
in a matter, we spent about what 10 or 15 minutes talking about this, but literally in a matter of a couple of minutes, we have all of these adventure labs into a file that we can easily cut and paste and put into cachetur. All right. So let's just pause for a second and look at some of this information. So we have a code here, and as you can see, it starts with the letters LC because that was the prefix code we asked it to use. It has the word lab. This is part of the format that cachetur expects in order to tell it that it's doing a lab. Right?
I remember that from the last show.
It has the coordinates of the location.
Mm-hmm.
And then over here, it has the name of the adventure. And then it has a stage number, and it has the actual name of the specific location. So you can see for Meadowvale Adventure, we have 5 locations. They're numbered 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So we have quite a bit of data here. And this is the exact format that cachetur needs to bring this in. So what I'm going to do is select all. So now everything in my editor is selected. I'm going to copy it. And for those of you who've seen this before, I'm going to go into cachetur, go into the bulk add waypoint. Now this, let's see if it accepts this many. I've seen this before. Invalid waypoint on line 240. I have an extra blank line in there, so I need to get rid of that blank line. So if we had done this without all of the chatting that I just did,
Yep.
we would have had 240 waypoints picked out and loaded up into cachetur in a matter of minutes. That's pretty amazing.
So what does that look? What does that look like on a map?
Yeah, I'm just scrolling down there.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Okay.
There we go. So there's a couple of lab caches in here that are just outside of Toronto, like this grouping down here, number 239, and whatever. We could easily delete those, but yeah, most of these are within the city of Toronto. So we could delete a few of these, but the point of tonight's broadcast is to talk about LAB2GPX and how easy it is to get information into cachetur. And you can see a very basic form, right? Understand what these options are. Select that we're going to download it to cachetur. We get it into a text file. You could easily put this into Excel or whatever else you want, but I choose text, and we cut and paste it into cachetur, and we've got all of our waypoints in there.
Wow.
Now, go back and watch some of our previous broadcasts on our live streams on basics of cachetur and Adventure Labs on how to optimize this and do some route planning, or stay tuned for the next session that we're planning, where we'll talk about a multi-day trip using cachetur and Project GC and LAB2GPX to create a whole 3-4 day trip plan, right?
Saturday, June 26th, I believe. Yes, Saturday, June 26th.
And I have no idea if the Leafs are playing that night. I'm sorry.
Okay, if the Leafs are playing, would that be the Stanley Cup by then?
Well, no, not quite.
No, not quite.
I don't.
What are they going to play in August?
Maybe.
It could
Who
be.
knows?
Oh my gosh.
Who
Anyway,
knows?
we will monitor the schedule and we will adapt accordingly. So, we might have a Friday broadcast. You never know. If there's a game on Saturday, we'll move. I will consult the Leafs fan there.
David Stokes says, "Is this like a season-ending cliffhanger?" No, no, it's not. All of the things that we've just talked about, you can put into play right now, right? So you can go out and say, you know what? I found this little town that has 3 or 4 adventure labs in it. I just don't feel like spending an hour putting all the coordinates in. Boom, LAB2GPX. Get your coordinate, set a radius of 5 or 10 kilometers, whatever. Pull them up, cut and paste, put them in, and you're done. What this does is it gets you out caching sooner. Right. So I actually went out today. I did 5 adventure labs. I drove about 500 kilometers this morning and this afternoon. I did 5 adventure labs. And what I did was I didn't decide until late last night that I was going to go do this. So I got onto LAB2GPX. I ran my 2 or 3 queries because I was going through a fairly large area, and I imported them into cachetur. I told it to optimize. I sorted those that were linear, and off I went. Right. So in a matter of 15 or 20 minutes, I had my trip planned, including bonus final caches and accessory stuff.
So because of what you put into the requirements for this map, this does not show linear labs? Like
it does.
It does. So how does it deal with the stages that you have to unlock?
How does it deal with the stages you have to unlock? Well,
the locations. I have to get used to that. The locations.
So the thing is that the API that LAB2GPX is using is able to pull information that you can't get in the Adventure Lab app until you've completed stuff.
So you can see this, the hidden parts that you can't see until you answer the question.
So look here, you can see that this is linear.
That's amazing.
This is linear,
I didn't know that.
And here are all the unique locations for each linear stage of that Adventure Lab.
Oh, that is cool. That is really cool.
But wait, there's more.
There's more?
There's more. So for the purposes of cachetur, this is what you get, right? So we showed that text file. You get all of the Adventure Lab information about each location in terms of its name, its location name, its coordinates for each location, and whether it's linear or not, right?
Wow.
You even can see that what LAB2GPX does. So I'm circling it here. Is it tells you what stage, right? So stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, stage 4, stage 5. It tells you that for nonlinear as well, but for nonlinear it doesn't matter. You can do those in any order. Right. But what this allows you to do now is we could do an optimize, and I'm sure that when we optimize it, it's going to put some of these linear ones out of order. We could go back and easily put them in order. Because
you know that they're linear, they have to go in a certain order.
Right.
That the cachetur program might not know that.
Right.
Oh, yeah, that's
right.
good. Yeah.
Right. So we could manually adjust this to say, okay, we know that Chazel's Pit is linear. We could look and see what the route says and just make sure that we're doing them, whatever route we choose, that we're doing them in the right order. Now, having this information doesn't preclude you from having to do those adventures in the correct order in the field. Right? The application still requires you to go to the first location before it will even let you navigate to the second location.
Right.
But because we've got a cachetur plan, you already know where the second location is. You can pre-plan your trip for that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you still have to go to each location one after the other in order to get the fence to drop, and
Right.
Very, very cool. At least you can plan ahead, whereas on the previous broadcast that we did, you couldn't do that. All you could plan was the first stage.
Well, actually, in the previous broadcast, we showed a way to figure out the location, because when we looked in the Adventure Lab app, let me just show you in one. I don't know which one off the top of my head. Actually, it's going to show them all as found anyways. In the Adventure Lab app, when you click on one of these buttons, one of these pins, and you bring up the Adventure Lab and you click on the map, it will show you the orange dot for the first location and gray dots for all the other locations. So you could estimate where they are. What it doesn't tell you is the order.
Right. That's right. Yeah.
Whereas LAB2GPX tells you the order.
Right. Okay.
Right. So now this is like an enhancement over what we talked about in January. Not only do you clearly get all this coordinate information in a breeze, but you now can understand the order for linear adventure labs.
Right. And for anybody, let me get rid of the map there for a second. Anybody that thinks that this is cheating, it's not. You still need to go to the originating location of a linear adventure lab first, and you have to get the fence to drop before you can get. You might know where it's going to go, but you have to go to the first one first, then the second one, then the third, and so on. So,
right. This really isn't cheating. This is just optimizing. This is a way to plan how to do your day. So although I didn't have LAB2GPX last year, I actually pushed myself. I wanted to do an immense number of adventure labs in one day. And I had already found a whole bunch of them in the Ontario area, but I managed to figure out a route. And I did 16 adventure labs in one day.
Wow.
And it was because I was able to get information about, where these things were, and for linear, kind of what order they were in. It was a lot harder back then to figure out the order, but I was able to talk to people and say, hey, what order were these in?
Oh, nice.
Now it's much simpler.
So you should put a post on the Lab Cache's Facebook page and ask the total number of adventure labs done in a day, and see if you've got the most.
Yeah, it's not important to me whether I've got the most. What was important?
It would be fun to know the total number that people have gotten. That would be cool.
We should actually post on the Project GC page that they should have a stat that tells us that, right? But the reason I did it was because I had found 10 at one point, and then a buddy of mine went out because I told him I'd found 10. He went out and found 12. So I said, I got to beat that. That's the only reason I did 16.
I think we only found 5 in one day, so I thought we were doing good.
Well,
10,
I'm
12,
I'm
that's amazing.
I'm a bit of an Adventure Lab lunatic, so
Yeah, so that's why we have you on, because you're well versed.
so I think what I'd like to do is pause here before I jump into the wait. There's more.
Hmm.
I'd like to pause here and see if anybody has any questions about what we've talked about so far. And I'll just remind everybody we've talked about entering coordinates and basic information into LAB2GPX. We talked about that file that gets exported as a CSV for cachetur, and then we talked about bringing it into cachetur using bulk waypoint.
Oh, here's a question. Why can't there be an even easier system? So much work. I have to keep rewatching these videos to get this. My goal is 18.
18. Ah.
Woo!
Now I'm going to have to go to Ottawa and do 25. Not that I've planned that out at all.
Wait for it. And then BK 649 and BK3 says it's just another tot.
Oh, are you referring to me?
No. The ability to be able to do this is just another tot.
So going back to Michelle's
it's a tool.
question, an easier way. I think that what we're seeing with HQ is a progression towards an easier way. So if you think about when the Adventure Labs first came out, nothing was really integrated. Recently, we've seen better maps on the Adventure Lab app. We've seen Adventure Lab showing up on the geocaching application and other third-party geocaching applications.
Yep.
So we're starting to see levels of integration, and I know that HQ is listening to people like Dave, the forums that we participate in, the other vloggers that are out there when we all say planning is key. They're watching these things. I can tell you that they are watching videos like this. They are watching the Facebook groups that we're in. I get questions from time to time from people at HQ asking me my thoughts and opinions on certain things. So, nice. Michelle, I think we're going to get there. And we'll have an easier way to do this. But right now, this is pretty easy, right? Yeah. The hardest part before, in my opinion, was actually finding the coordinates for each of those locations. Right now, we've got this tool that makes it really simple.
I know from my contacts at HQ, and one of my friends at HQ is on this team for Adventure Labs, and they have a list. And she said, you just pick a number, like 650 things that people have asked for, but they have to narrow it down to what's the most important that gets to the top. So they're coming, but it's just the list is so huge before they can add everything, and they have to pick and choose. So, yeah, it's coming.
David asks if Adventure Labs surpass traditional caches because they have less physical restrictions. Well, that's an interesting question, and I think Dave, if you can get one of your HQ contacts on a panel one day, that would be a great question to have a debate on.
I would love that, and I will pose that question. That would be really good to have you and one of our people that we know on. I've tried so far, but I'm going to push again. They're shy.
Some of them are. They're also very busy, and
yes.
Part of the challenge is that if they agree to do this for you, then now they've got to agree for the other vloggers that are out there and the other media that want them to do it. And this is still very much, Adventure Labs are still very much in testing mode. They're still in beta mode, right? This is still development. It's not final. So they're very busy trying to determine what gets final. When they do share their time with us, and we've had that experience recently with some of the HQ lackeys, it's so amazing that they actually spend that time with us, give us insights, and listen to us. And even though it's not often, it's amazing when they do it. So
Yeah,
All
I'm
right.
amazed. I'm amazed when I get an email response.
Yeah.
It's like,
Yes.
oh, okay, I know the person is very busy, and it's like, oh, okay, good. Don't expect an immediate reply. It's coming. It may take a while because they are very busy. They're working
That's
very
right.
hard.
Okay, so let's move on to the there's more part. All right. So I'm just going to close a few of my windows. I'm going to close these windows. And I'm going to create a new trip. So let me go in and no, I didn't need to do that. Sorry.
Do 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 do.
So this set of Adventure Labs is huge. I'm going to cancel this trip.
There's always another trip. Speaking of trips, tomorrow we're going on our third excursion to geocaching the North Shore of Lake Erie. And I just started editing the first video. So that will be coming up next month, I think.
So I'm going to create a new trip. It's going to be the same sort of parameters.
David Stokes. What is caching, Alex, for 200?
There we go. All right, so I've created a new trip, and it's blank. Okay. I'm going to leave this file the way it is. All right. I'm just going to leave this file the way it is. And the reason I'm going to leave it the way it is because we're going to enrich this with some information. Now, this little trick does require you to use GSAK. And again, I am not a huge GSAK user, and I'm not going to go into the fundamentals of GSAK tonight. So if you want to do this, you're going to have to find some videos on GSAK or ask a friend just to get started if you're not already using it. So let me launch GSAK.
So, Doug, would you like to share that trip with me?
So I'll tell you the same thing I told Dave when we did our second or third broadcast, which is no.
You got to do it yourself.
Use the tools. Well, that's the point, right? Use the
Yeah.
tools so that you get familiar with them. It's getting easier and easier and easier to do this every time, right? A year ago, this planning would have taken me days. At the beginning of the year, it took hours. It now just took minutes. Right? Okay, so GSAK. I'm in an empty database, right? Which is what I want to be in. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to LAB2GPX. I'm going to use the same sort of parameters that we already had. So I'm just going to copy our coordinates. One little trick about LAB2GPX, if you've done a download and you want to do another one, just do a refresh on your browser. And yep, we've got the right thing. So this time, what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring this into a GPX file into GSAK. So this part now becomes important, this description box. Include waypoint question and cache description. Include description of the waypoint in the cache description. Include the description of the Adventure Lab in the cache description. And this optional one that I've checked, include a word message in cache description, may contain spoilers. Okay. So this time I'm going to create a GPX file. And I think what I'm going to do is just change this radius a little bit so that we get fewer entries just to speed things up. All right, it really doesn't have an impact other than processing speed. So I'm going to change that radius to 5 kilometers. And I'm going to go ahead and download that new GPX file. You can see it's now ready down here. So I'll go into my download folder, and there is the GPX file. I'm just going to double click on it. I've already aligned it with GSAK. So it opens GSAK, and this is how you bring a GPX file into GSAK. And please, nobody ask me any more than this, because I don't know much more about GSAK than this. All right, so we've now imported this into GSAK, and here's what we get. So up here we get this code. So that's again the code that was created by LAB2GPX. We've got this icon. Remember I said GSAK understands lab caches? If we had told LAB2GPX to use the virtual cache instead, then this icon would show up as a virtual cache. We get the name and the segment, or the order, and we also get this L for anything that's linear, right? But we get a whole bunch of other information in here too. So we get who the cache owner is. We get when it was placed, right? But let's scroll down into this section, right down on the left.
Now, that's information that you don't get otherwise. Is when the cache was placed.
That's correct.
In the Adventure Lab app.
That's correct.
Huh.
So again, there's an API that HQ is still working on, but LAB2GPX leverages that API in order to get some information. And some of the information they can get doesn't even appear in the application itself, in the AL app.
Wow.
So this is the enrichment part that people might want to explore on their own more to do in GSAK. But here's where you get a lot of information. So we're looking at the Carousel of Nations, which is in Corktown. One of the first things I want to show you in GSAK is this URL, right? https://labs.geocaching.com/go-to culture-to. This URL, if you use it on your phone, will open up this particular adventure on your phone. Okay? Yep. So let me say that again. If you were to use this URL on your phone, it would open up the Adventure Lab app and go directly to this adventure. Now, where this comes in really handy for cachetur, this is again the enrichment part.
Cachetur or GPX?
Cachetur. Cachetur.
Okay.
So this is the Carousel of Nations. Let's find the Carousel of Nations. Oh, did I spell it wrong? I did. No, I'm not at the top. That's why. Let's find the Carousel of Nations in our export. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put 2 spaces in, and I'm going to paste this URL. Okay. So for each of these, I'm just doing a quick paste. Now, this is optional. You do not have to do this. But for those of you who used cachetur before, and you recall about the cachetur app to use in the field, if you put this URL into your cachetur plan, and you're using the cachetur app on your phone in the field, when you open cachetur for this particular item, you can click on the link and it will open Adventure Labs for you. You don't have to open the Adventure Lab app yourself and search for the adventure.
Huh.
So this is a neat little trick. For those of you familiar with cut and paste or using tools like Excel, you could easily put this in for a whole bunch of labs. Yep. What I'm going to do is just show you this little section. We're going to import this into cachetur. So here's our test trip. And we're going to go waypoints, bulk add waypoints. I'm going to make sure I don't have that blank line at the end. Now, what you can see here is in the description, it's actually added, because I put 2 spaces. It's actually added this URL. Now again, when you're on your phone and you're using the cachetur app, and you look at this particular waypoint, you can touch that URL and it will open Adventure Labs, and it will open it into that adventure. You still need to select the location you want to go to, but it's taking 2 or 3 steps away and helping to automate that. So that's a little enrichment. You don't have to do that. It's completely up to you. But if you do want to do it, this is how I figured out how to do it, was to load the GPX file into GSAK, and then to find that particular Adventure Lab and copy the URL for that Adventure Lab.
Neat.
All right, let's look at a little bit more information that they have inside GSAK. So look at this part. Question. Some people might consider this an advantage. Some people might consider it cheating. I'm not going to pass comment on it other than to tell you that the API allows this information to be pulled. LAB2GPX puts it in a GPX file. So it's got the question for each location. It doesn't have the answer. But if you wanted to know what the question was before you got there, you could get it out of GSAK. And again, you could put it into cachetur, or you could have it as part of your GPX file. Okay. So it also has the waypoint description. So here's the photo that would appear in the Adventure Lab when you look at that location. Here's the description that would appear. All right. Here's the photo for the overall Adventure Lab and the description for the overall Adventure Lab. And then it has the award information. So it has the photo and the award message that comes up. Now, I want to point this out. This particular Adventure Lab has a bonus final cache. So, for those of you who are trying to do speed caching, like I've done from time to time, and you want to know where those bonus finals are so that you can plan them in advance, if you choose to do so, you can download the GPX file from LAB2GPX, bring it into GSAK, and you can get this information. But remember, go back to here, that was optional, right? By default, it's not selected in LAB2GPX.
Yep.
And it does say it may contain spoilers. So I selected it this time so that we could all see that it's there. So again, this is enrichment information. It is in GSAK. I've downloaded this now. GSAK creates a local database on my computer. So now I have this information. I can read it at my leisure. I can choose to do what I want with it. All right. This particular information doesn't get downloaded when you select the cachetur CSV file. It only gets downloaded when you bring a GPX file and then use a tool like GSAK to look at the contents of the GPX.
Nice.
So I'm going to stop there and see if there's any questions.
They're dumbfounded.
So one thing I will say is if there are any GSAK experts out there who are interested in doing a session like this, please contact Dave. Right. We've talked about cachetur for Adventure Labs. There is a whole group of people out there who swear by GSAK for Adventure Labs. And I know very little about it, but somebody who does might be able to add a lot of value to our viewers.
Yeah. I've had it on my computer before. I just have not been able to... There's a couple of things I did with it, but I didn't understand it enough. And then once I started vlogging and working, I didn't have the time to really research it.
Right.
Now, SimRebel has told me that if I could understand cachetur, that I could easily understand GSAK. He said it's easier. I don't know if that's true or not, but
I just
don't have the time.
Yeah, I'm going to disagree with Brent on that one. I've looked at GSAK in the like I'm an IT guy and I've worked in IT my whole life. I've looked at GSAK in the past and gone, ugh, it's got a fairly steep learning curve. For whatever reason, cachetur had a less steep learning curve for me. It may be that cachetur has more of a graphic user interface, right? So bring up my cachetur. Let me bring up my cachetur. So, cachetur has more of a graphical user interface, and it seems to me it's just a little bit easier to use.
It almost doesn't tell you what to do, but you can see it more visually.
You still need to figure stuff out, right? It's not intuitive to me, but it's more intuitive to me than GSAK.
Yeah.
Maybe Brent's the guy to have on.
Yeah, if he wants to come on, it'd be great. Because all I see is columns and numbers, but what do I do with it? I don't know. You got the menu at the top, but I couldn't never really figure out what to do. And then macros. Well, where do you get those from? Like, how do you find them? Yeah,
that's magic to me.
Yeah,
I know a few people who are very much into GSAK, and if I was trying to answer those questions, then I would be buying one of them bottles of scotch.
So there you go.
There you go. So that's really the end of what I wanted to share with everybody today, and I'll just do a quick recap, right? Oops. So we talked about LAB2GPX. The URL is right here. It's also in the stream banner. It's gcutils.de/lab2gpx, or if you go to Google and just Google LAB2GPX,
yep, that's
it
what I did.
Will come up. Yep, it'll come up. There it is, right there. And oh, hey, look, we're number 2 on Google.
Woo!
For that search. So we talked about the options that are in here. It's very straightforward. You give it some coordinates. You give it a radius. You can play with a few of these other things. Make sure you mark using L in title. It makes things a lot simpler. If you're using GSAK, this stuff is important in the description field. If you want to exclude caches, you can. And really, you have 2 output formats: a cachetur.no CSV file and GPX. And all we really added to the picture here was a quick, easy way to get the coordinates into cachetur. Plus, if you're interested in doing some enrichment, use GSAK. And of particular note is this URL link. So I have to give credit to the Robson family from Brampton who put me onto this little tip a few months ago, and I've been using it ever since, and I love it. Get that URL, put it into your bulk waypoint upload for cachetur.
Nice.
Make sure that you put the right URL to the right Adventure Lab. You wouldn't want to put the Ghost Hunter URL against the Carousel of Nations Adventure Lab, because then you'd be opening the wrong adventure every time. Okay. So, Roger asked a question. Roger said, does that info line the questions load into a Garmin? So, Roger, I can't answer that yet. That's one thing I haven't played with. I haven't played with LAB2GPX and actually put it into a Garmin to see what gets loaded. So if that's something you'd like to do tomorrow before you go caching, and let us know, that'd be fantastic.
Very nice.
Yeah, and maybe when I get a few moments, I'll take a look at that. I've never really found the need to use my Garmin to navigate to an Adventure Lab. I know some people like to do it for a number of reasons, because one of them is because the Adventure Lab app on your phone chews up a lot of battery. So
it does.
A lot of people talk about using their Garmin to navigate to the location and then powering up their phone to answer the Adventure Lab question. I've never had that problem because I have 2 big portable battery packs that can power up my device for like 3 weeks or something. So I've never really had that issue. But yeah, Roger, if you know the answer sometime, let me know. I will try and take a look at it at some point in the future so that I can answer questions like that.
Very nice. All right. That pretty much we're almost at an hour. 4 more seconds, we'll be at an hour. And how are the Leafs doing?
No score.
No score. And second period?
Second period.
Second period. And so we'll get you on to the third period. I want to thank you, and I have a giveaway. I just have on my desk this. It is a community volunteer a tag that I found somewhere. It's unactivated. So I am going to give this away to one viewer. So I have taken all the comments that were made and I have put it into the wheel of names, and I'm just going to spin the wheel and see what comes up. So this is off screen, and it's going to stop at Roger Sanderson. There you go. He's been very active. He's been very active in the chat today. So there you go, Roger. Send me your info, and I will get that tag to you. So there you go. And the other winners from 2 weeks ago, I think it was 2 weeks ago, they finally got sent away in the mail. So you can look for those coming soon. So, and you said you are going to be on another broadcast, June 26th, did we say? And you're going to be talking about, yes, Saturday, June 26th with DougyB.
And it's going to be pulling a lot of the information together over the last 4 broadcasts that we've done, the last 4 videos that we've done, leveraging tools like cachetur, like Project GC, and like LAB2GPX to plan a multi-day trip. What I'm targeting is, I know Dave loves webcams and Karen loves webcams, and they want to get more webcams out, particularly in the US. So we're going to target a West Coast romantic getaway for Dave and Karen.
Woohoo!
They're going to be going to San Francisco. They're going to spend a night
in webcams there
in Monterey, and then they're going to end up eventually in Los Angeles. So
very nice.
The next trip we'll plan for that, and we'll tie all of these tools together. We're gonna use Project GC to find specific caches along a route. We're going to use LAB2GPX to grab Adventure Lab information.
Nice.
We're going to use cachetur to create our trip. And heads up, do some checking and some learning and some investigation. We're going to be previewing something called the Cachetur Assistant. Now, it's a tool that's out there right now. You can go to cachetur and look it up, look how to install it. But it's a great little tool that allows you to overlay your cachetur road trip onto the geocaching or Project GC maps.
Yes,
and,
I've seen that. Yep.
And if you see a cache that's along your route, you can easily click it and have it added to your cachetur plan.
Nice.
So we're gonna show that too.
And I just wanted to mention that our last trip, I think this weekend, was our first and second day. No, I think we did 3 days. Yeah, we did 3 days. We both loaded up the cachetur app, and I was able to share because we hadn't had time together to be able to communicate what we were actually doing. So I was able to share the tour of the North Shore of Lake Erie with Karen via cachetur. So she could pull it up, and she knew exactly where we were going and which cache was next.
Great.
A great tool.
Love these tools. So thank you very much, everybody. And particularly Dave and Karen for inviting me to do these things. I really do enjoy doing them, and I hope that we'll have a few more coming up for tools like cachetur and maybe some other stuff that comes out as well.
Yeah, if anybody has any questions, just send them either to Doug or myself, londonwesty@gmail.com. And Doug, your email is
DougyB, DougyB.gc@outlook.com.
Yeah. And if you want to know something that you would like us to put into another show coming up, let us know. Or some other topic you think we might be able to bring to you and give you some information, we can do that too. And we have a show that we're trying to put together. We're going to be talking about the Trans-Canada Highway Adventure Lab series. Doug and I are both on a committee for the entire length of this Adventure Lab series, and this is modeled after the Lincoln Highway Series project and Route 66, and now there's one going up Route 1. So a lot of people were chatting a little bit here and there on we saw on Facebook groups, and I knew somebody that had been in touch with HQ, so we have launched into doing that. So Dougie and I are in charge of Ontario. So we're going to be doing a live stream, including many of the members on that team. So there we go. Look forward to that.
And what we'll be doing is coordinating the location and areas that Adventure Labs will go in. So Dave and I are splitting up. There's multiple segments of the Trans-Canada Highway in Ontario. Mm-hmm. Everybody knows about Highway 17/417, so Dave will be handling that area, and I'll be handling all the other various segments of the TCH in Ontario, and we'll be working with cachers to assign those areas to them, make sure that they have all the information they need, make sure they follow some of the guidelines around branding and verbiage, and helping them get their ALs published along the TCH.
Yep. Yeah, it's not about control for us. It's just helping guide people to make sure that we get all the ducks in a row and we're doing what HQ would like us to do, because there's a certain number of parameters they want us to follow, and we just try to help to coordinate that. That's all we're doing. We're offering our time to coordinate the efforts of everybody to get a something that's enjoyable to you. So there you go. All right, I think that's it. Doug, is it done period 2 yet?
I don't know.
Oh,
I was talking. I wasn't looking at it's on a commercial now, so I don't know.
Oh, okay. All right. So thank you very much again for joining us and Cache Canada Chats. This is a great series. I'm really loving it, and I think people are really getting a lot out of it. So thank you very much. We will see you again. We have a lot of videos already primed in our schedule for Cache Canada, so keep an eye out for that. There's 2 every single week, and it's either a live stream or a pre-planned video. So just check out for that. So thank you very much.
Have a great remainder of the weekend, everyone.
Oh, and one little point. Geocacher Ken is on that same committee we are too. He's looking after Manitoba. So there you go. Just wanted to give a little shout out. So we're going to close out here. I'm going to play a little video, and then we will see everybody. So thank you very much. See everybody.
Bye now.